It has been 6 months since Gaul's life changed forever. Since 2 wizards destroyed his home in a senseless battle. Since he lost his entire family, save his sister, Greensleeves. Since he was hired by one of the wizards, Towser, to drive mules. 6 months since that wizard betrayed Gaul and tried to kill his sister. Since he learned Greensleeves herself was a wizard and fought off Towser, and together the siblings vowed to put an end to evil wizards and the chaos they caused. In the half a year since their confrontation with Towser, the siblings' crusade has brought them far into the north, aimless save for the desire to learn as much of the land as possible. Along the way, they've gathered around them quite the army in the making. Mercenaries and adventurers alike flocked to their banner, as have Samite healers trying to help the injured, and merchants just looking to make easy coin on the march. Students of magic, eager to assist Greensleeves in not only exploring her new powers, but cataloging and studying the artifacts left behind by Towser, were in tow, and with the discovery of a simple portal, Gaul and Greensleeves were able to bring over many of the prisoners Towser had trapped on his private island. But the journey had not exactly been smooth sailing. They'd battled a handful of wizards along the way, each time suffering losses, though succeeding in driving off their sorceress foes and recruiting any stragglers abandoned by the enemy. The goal of this ramshack army, as it was twofold. The first was to find and defeat any wizards they could to put an end to their vile sorcery. The second was to scour the land and learn as much as they could of the domains. While Gaul and Greensleeves had no home to return to, the centaurs Helke and Holib, the giant Liko, and many others summoned by wizards hoped to one day find their way back to their homelands once again. The sun had set by the time Noreen had laid her child to bed. Haman, her son with Garth. Not long ago, Garth had been the most powerful wizard in the domains. He had conquered the arena of Estark, taken revenge on his family's killers, and ascended, briefly, to the power of a planeswalker. But now, he and Noreen had settled down. They lived on a vineyard, a simple life. But once one has experienced the full might of magic, the allure becomes nigh impossible to resist. With Hammon asleep, Noreen confronted Garth about his frequent trips away from home. Always he left to pursue magic elsewhere, spending less and less time now with her or their child. But this time, like before, she had no success, and after another argument, Garth was gone on some new mystic quest. When Noreen returned to her home, she was shocked to find strangers inside. Putting up a fight against the invaders, Noreen was even more surprised to find out that they were Banalish, heroes like her, and that they came to take her and her son away. After being overpowered and restrained, Noreen was teleported away by the wizard Guyapi back to Benalia. There she was quickly brought to trial. The charges were abandoning her post and cowardice, and while she would have been executed for these supposed crimes, the council, led by Sabrium, a piggish man whose affections Noreen once spurned, had something else in mind. To the Banalish hero, the council explained that there was a new threat to Benalia, an army led by a wizard and her brother, a woodcutter. Noreen would be sent to the army to infiltrate their ranks and bring back the heads of the leaders. If she did this, she and her son would be freed. And so, with Hammond being condemned to public education in her absence, Noreen was once again teleported away with magic. She landed somewhere cold and chaotic, a snow-covered, blood-soaked battlefield deep in an evergreen forest. Gull's army had been attacked at camp by a wizard named Carly, who attacked with cavalry and men on flying carpets, decimating the ragtag forces. While Gull and his allies struggled to fend off the wizard's minions, Greensleeves found herself challenged by Carly directly, who summoned a mighty devil to overpower the girl. With an easy victory seemingly in her grasp, Carly moved to claim her objective in the attack, the Monovault. But when the wizard grasped it, the artifact, to her shock and immense frustration, merely phased through her hand. Seeing an opportunity, Greensleeves summoned leeches all over Carly, disgusting the wizard and causing her to flee the scene in fury. Not knowing the identity of the man in front of her, Noreen helped Gull fight off the enemy and, when the battle was over, asked to meet with Gull the woodcutter. To her shock, she finds that the awkward, poorly trained man in front of her is the supposedly fearsome general threatening Benalia, the man she was sent to kill. Even more surprising was the manner in which he conducted himself among his followers. To Noreen's bewilderment, Gull and Greensleeves talked openly around the fire with their comrades on equal terms. They did not seek retribution against the fighters summoned by Carly, and instead offered the survivors a place in their ranks. Most surprising of all, however, was the stated goal of the siblings. They had no plans for Benalia. Their desire was to hunt down evil wizards and put a stop to their destructive ways. Seeing now the terrible choice in front of her, and knowing in her pained heart that she would have to choose between saving her son and doing the right thing for the world, Noreen introduced herself to Gull and Greensleeves as Raquel, her birth name, and signed on for their crusade. At night, Greensleeves is plagued by nightmares, visions of dark forests and trees that more resemble human brains than wood. During one such nightmare, the young wizard is suddenly awoken by a voice calling out to her, beckoning her to its source. Despite an injured leg, Greensleeves gets up out of her tent and, without anyone else noticing, rides off into the night upon a horse. Her journey takes her far into the north, the hours passing like minutes, days passing like hours. The sun rises and sets, with Greensleeves never once stopping for rest. There in the north, resting up against a rock, Greensleeves finds the source of the voice, an elderly woman, a wizard by the name of Cheney. Unbelievably ancient and wise, Cheney was a druid, one with a particularly strong connection with nature, and she offered to train Greensleeves, to not only teach the girl the laws of magic, but to help her become a mighty druid herself. Eager to learn, Greensleeves accepts. In the morning, Gull alongside Raquel and a few others hop onto their own horses, setting off after the wayward Greensleeves. For days they followed in her trail, with the rest of the army following whenever they could. Once Gull finally does catch up with Greensleeves, he finds that his sister has changed a great deal over the last few days. She'd grown taller, lost her stutter, even healed from her prior injuries. And the truth was that, though it were mere days for Gull and the others, to Greensleeves, years had passed. Years under Cheney's tutelage, learning the secrets of mana and magic, nature and worlds. With Greensleeves and her aides, Tybalt and Quam, studying with Cheney, Gull instead turns his attention to the army. Here, Raquel's experience as a Banalish hero shine. The woman taking command of training and reforming the motley crew under the woodcutter's command, shaping them up into a proper fighting force. She would also, in time, convey the truth of her purpose to Gull, that she was sent to assassinate them, that her son was captive in Benalia, and that her heart was torn. Gull, grateful to her actions on his behalf so far, vowed that their forces would take on Benalia and rescue Hammon. Around the same time, it's discovered that the mana vault left behind by Towser was no mana vault at all. It was in truth the Stone Brain, an artifact created by the sages of Lat-Nam in ages past as part of their attempts to bring an end to the destructive Brothers' War. The Stone Brain was a living artifact, one that babbled constantly and shifted form on command, and after Tybalt put on the Stone Brain, after it became a helmet, the group learned its true power was to compel wizards, to command them to give up their magic. The voices in the Stone Brain were the collective wills of the sages, and any wizard who donned the helm would be hard-pressed to resist its commands. Knowing now that they wielded a weapon that could finally bring an end to evil wizards, Gull and his allies simply needed to find a wizard to test it on. Fortunately, one came sooner rather than later. Over the course of several days, the army was harassed by the forces summoned by an unseen wizard, and time again, their reformed might was able to repel the attacks until, finally, Gull, Greensleeves, and Raquel managed to locate the sorcerer's lair. In a tower surrounded by orcs lay their enemy, and Gull's army lay siege to it with a devastating sneak attack, Greensleeves bringing down the tower with her magic, and Gull personally capturing the enemy wizard. This man, Hakon, was a petulant one, claiming himself as the king of the Badlands. But for his gruff and smug exterior, he was helpless before the terror of the Stone Brain, and was rendered immobile by the artifact as it assailed his mind. The army had little time to celebrate their victory, with dual tragedies striking that very night. Raquel was attacked and captured by the wizard Guyapi, taken once more back to Benalia, and at the same time, Hakon made his move. While the Stone Brain had prevented him from attempting to physically free himself, the self-titled king was still able to, just barely, use magic, and so he summoned in a very desperate attempt to free himself. Unfortunately, what he ended up conjuring was a small horde of vicious demons that hailed from the dark world of Phyrexia, and these creatures absconded with the Stone Brain itself. Once the chaos had settled down, Gull and Greensleeves argued over which to rescue between Raquel and the Stone Brain. Raquel, Gull argued, was too valuable to the army to abandon, and Benalia would torture her to death by dawn. But Greensleeves wanted to prioritize retrieving the stone brain. Phyrexia was another remnant of the Brothers' War. It was known as the Hell for Artifacts, and the demons that resided there loved nothing more than destroying whatever magical trinkets they pilfered. The stone brain, the key to their overall goals, would not last long there. Fortunately, Cheney was able to break up the siblings' squabble and laid out a plan to help them achieve both goals. She educated Greensleeves and Lily in the art of shifting, and the two novice wizards each took small strike teams to their destinations. Gull went with Lily into the city of Benalia, and together with his small rescue team managed to not only retrieve Raquel, who was indeed subjected to brutal torture, but also kill Sabrium, the man who ordered her suffering, and rescue Haman as well, before escaping the High Council's tower, though they suffered the loss of two great soldiers to the warriors of Benalia. And just when it seemed like they would be picked off by Benalia's elite Drake Knights, Gull and the others found themselves summoned across worlds to an even bleaker place, the Hell of Phyrexia, where demons waited. While Gull and his dwindling allies fought back against the Phyrexian devils, Greensleeves at last managed to find the stone brain and, seeing no alternative, wore it herself, hoping it might hold even more secrets. To the druid's surprise, the voices of the stone brain were not as daunting as she feared. Her experience in the Whispering Woods, spending most of her life as a simple girl thanks to the enchantment of that forest, made her resistant to the voices and allowed her to search for the spells the stone brain contained. With access to this new magic, Greensleeves was able to drive off the Phyrexian demons, saving her friends before teleporting them all back home, back to the Whispering Woods themselves. There, after rejoining with their army, Gull and Greensleeves find another wizard, Dacian, the one who had dueled Towser in the battle that destroyed their home. Their army easily overwhelmed the wizard's forces, and once she was captured, Greensleeves forced the stone brain onto Dacian's head. With this newest victory under their belt, one final surprise appeared for Gull and Greensleeves. Garth, Raquel's husband, who had been looking for his wife and son. Furious, Garth immediately did not get along with Gull, and a vicious fight would break out between the two men, before Greensleeves could ultimately calm everyone down. Learning what happened to his wife in Benalia, and how it happened, in part because he was not there to protect her, Garth formally gave up magic, helping the army in his own way to grow even stronger before returning, with his wife and son, to their humble farm. Greensleeves, for her part, had both Dacian and Hakon released. Gull was initially hesitant to allow either wizard out of their sight, but Greensleeves explained, then demonstrated, that thanks to the stone brain, she could summon both back and command them at will, and was satisfied with that. The story ends with Gull and Greensleeves bolstered in their crusade, with centaurs and trained soldiers signing up for their cause. In light of recent events, Gull and Lily decide to marry, and Cheney, having nothing left to teach her student, passes on, having lived long enough and leaving Greensleeves with the last of her mana as a parting gift. And thus, with tidings both good and bad, Gull and Greensleeves look to the future of their crusade, knowing that, with their army and the Stone Brain, their goal of putting an end to evil wizards is that much closer to being accomplished. Elsewhere, the wizard Carly is approached by both Dakian and Hakon, who had a proposition for her. Greensleeves likely didn't know it yet, but the Stone Brain held another secret. Any wizard that touched it could contact any other wizard that had. And so, the three wizards schemed on how to bring an end to the siblings' crusade, and, as the story ends, they plot to bring another into their fold, Towser. Shattered Chains is the second installment in the Greensleeves trilogy, and it is an excellent follow-up to The Whispering Woods, with the readers getting to follow along as Gull and his sister set out on their optimistic crusade to end all magical evil in the world. It's a naive goal, sure, but a righteous cause, and one they try to stick to throughout the story. And this isn't just a sequel to The Whispering Woods, mind you. It's also a follow-up to the events of Arena, and in these 3 books, you get a sense of the scale that Harper Prism's authors were working with, creating an interconnected world that showed great promise, something that could have been much larger if they had continued, although that's a discussion for another video. One thing I do want to comment on here is that I absolutely love how Garth is portrayed in this book. In Arena, he's a calm, calculated individual, hell-bent on accomplishing his goals, and every one of his plans seems to have a backup plan in case things go south. Here, meanwhile, he's like a hobo with a knife, acting erratic and picking a fight literally the moment he returns to the plot. It's great. We don't see much, but we're shown that though he did try to let go at first, ultimately he did grasp ultimate power during the events of Arena, and that kind of magic is addictive. Garth isn't able to properly care for his family, and that puts them in danger, all because he's just consumed by magic like so many wizards before him. And this theme, the idea that powerful magic can corrupt your mind and soul, is visited several times throughout the novel, with Greensleeves herself being worried at several points that she could lose her mind again if she gave herself over to magic. Ultimately, Garth is able to come to his senses and see the wrong he's done and become better, and ultimately, Greensleeves has nothing to worry about in the magic department since she's already been mad once before. She also gets to experience a lot of growth in this story. Not just aging up, mind you, but maturing as a person and becoming more confident in herself and her abilities, and she even starts to fall in love with Qualm, one of her assistants. Gull himself grows too. He starts out the story as kind of self-depreciating, and he can't see the victories he's won as worth it, but he becomes emboldened more and more as the story goes on, until ultimately he leads the charge into Benalia to rescue a woman that confessed to being sent for his hand. Good stuff. This book is much more vicious than the previous 2. Fight scenes aren't littered throughout the story, mind you, but when they do happen, we get absolutely gory descriptions here and there, especially in regards to how Noreen is tortured. That's the kind of mental image you don't forget easily. Also, this book is probably one of the earliest bits of lore we get for the Brothers' War. Though we don't get a lot of hard details, that conflict is the backdrop of the story, and one of its consequences, the Stone Brain, is central to the plot. Oh, and just in case you had any thoughts about this happening in the same continuity as the Brothers' War you're familiar with, Hakon has the Might Stone during this story, so yeah, it's unlikely. Another major difference from later Magic canon is Phyrexia. While we don't really get to see much of the plane, it's less of a horrid amalgamation of flesh and metal with a dark god at the center and more of a dreary, toxic hellscape, largely inhabited by demons. In the novel, it's described as a sort of remnant of the Brothers' War and a hell where demons destroy artifacts rather than, well, whatever it is Yawgmoth does when he's not fucking with Urza. And also, planeswalking is a pretty big plot device here. It's called shifting in this novel, and it's more or less just another skill wizards can have. While it is difficult for Greensleeves and Lily to learn, they do still pull it off, with Greensleeves even warping across several other planes before ultimately landing in Phyrexia. I know I don't really have to say it, but that's obviously not how planeswalking works in the current continuity, and that's fine. The more I read these stories, the more comfortable I became with the differences that they had compared to modern Magic. It's starting to grow on me more, you know? And speaking of differences, this novel does not at any point try to reconcile the differences between the way magic is used in Arena compared to how it's used here. Garth's satchel of amulets is kinda glossed over, and it's explained in the book that wizards keep trinkets as a way to quickly recollect spells, but nothing more concrete is really said on the topic. Fun stuff. Guess we really will never find out how Arena's magic worked, although I guess I'm not really losing any sleep over it. In fact, my only real complaint in regards to the story is that during the climax, to save her friends, Greensleeves dons the stone brain. There's nothing I could really find in the story itself that would give her any reason to suspect doing this could be beneficial in any way. The stone brain was only ever said to be a tool for controlling wizards, so Greensleeves doing this, and it paying off, really kind of felt like an ass pull to me, I'm gonna be honest. Ultimately though, I did really enjoy this story quite a lot. I give it a solid 7 out of 10, and I'm looking forward to the third and final installment in the series. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, all that good stuff for the algorithm. If you want to support the channel directly, consider heading on over to Patreon. Patrons get early access to my content, and I do appreciate their support. If you ever want to chat, I am on Discord, and am always up to discussing magic lore. And remember, a proxy a day keeps the wizard away. Thanks again, and have a good day.